Thank you so much, Miha, for inviting me today, and thank you for joining me. It's really nice to see such a large audience on the last day and nearly the last hour of the meeting. I'm really thrilled to be here. We don't always get approval to come to ISMB, so I'm so glad that myself and many of my colleagues could join you this week. What a great conference. What wonderful discussions you've had today. I hope that we'll have a wonderful panel. I want to tell you a little bit about how we're supporting critical data infrastructure at the National Institutes of Health, what some of our thinking is going forward, and most importantly, to hear from you, and I've heard a lot today, about how we can improve this whole enterprise, because that's really what our goal is to make it a better data ecosystem. So I come from the Office of the Director, and in particular, the Office of Data Science Strategy. We like to think that we're elevating the frontiers of biomedical data science. I hope that's true. What do we actually do? We coordinate and we lead across our 27 institute centers and offices. We help develop the vision of a modern and integrated biomedical data ecosystem. We support that in many different ways by partnering with the ICs to support funding initiatives, and you'll see a few of them, by leading our own funding activities, you'll see that too, and by developing a talented workforce both within your communities in the extramural world and also within our communities at NIH, and to build partnerships with you here in Europe, partnerships with other agencies, and partnerships with nonprofits. And so you'll see some of that. First, a shameless plug. We did release our 2025 to 2030 strategic plan for data science. I can't go through all of it, but I would like to go through the first goal, which is how can we actually sustain our NIH policy for data management, data sharing, which requires that our investigators who are applying for grants or contracts or other transactional authorities write a data management sharing plan that tells us how they're going to manage and share their data. And then our job is to actually help them do that. And that's a big lift. I'll just say that there may be some revisions in that policy coming forward in the next several months. So everything that I say, that policy could change, and that happens with policy. So some things may get easier. At least I hope so. So there's a lot of different ways that we can support data sharing within the community. For example, we partnered with FastHub for a number of years to support a prize that would ask different types of how do you share your data, tell us a story, give us a plan, use a data repository. That's been really informative and productive. I just want to call out that we do have a really productive partnership with Elixir. We partner on the FAIR Cookbook, on the RDM research data management. We had a wonderful session led by Ishwar and Peter just yesterday on the partnership between NIH and Elixir. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the other things we do. The one thing I'm not going to tell you about today, and I wish I would have thought about it, is our sustainable and reusable software program. So we fund 2 initiatives that is surprisingly subscribed by most of the institutes to fund software, essentially hardening or making software more usable within the research community. Maybe you want to modularize that. Maybe you want to lift and shift to the cloud. We support that across the agency. And we also support something new, which is research fellows who are software developers. These folks are often on soft money, and that's not easy for them to get funding. So this is a program that supports them as researchers to nurture their career and support software development in academia, which is really hard to do. We know the bus to Google is fast. We want to sustain our community of software developers. Those 2 programs were subscribed by over 300 applications. So that tells you just what the community itself wants to see in software development, research funding for software, and software developers. So I'm really thankful that we can do that, and Ishwar is our lead there, and that we can continue doing that in the future. So let me tell you about everything else. First of all, what a great meeting to talk about the things that are really maybe a little easier, maybe not so much, curation, metadata standards, ontologies. There's rich communities for that, and people can plug in. Making the management, the knowledge annotation, the graphs, bringing that together and integrating it is an evolving research enterprise that we are super happy to support. But what is hard for us, and maybe this is where you can help us, is to show the return on investment. It's not just counting how many people visited your website or visit your database or downloaded your data. It's what was the return on that investment? And it doesn't have to be money. I have a lot of arguments with my staff that return on investment, it does not mean more money was generated from the data, but there were more things, more scientific value, more papers came out of it, more IP, more innovation, more inventions came out of it, that, or more software, more AI was trained on it. That's a return on investment that we can all relate to. And you see that because that's what happened with AlphaFold. Without the PDB, there would be no AlphaFold. And so that's a return on investment that we can all argue was huge, but it's like 20 or 30 years later. So the end of somebody's career, they finally feel good, like that was a big investment. That's the sort of thing that we have a really hard time articulating. We need your help. So let me tell you about how we at NIH are supporting data repositories and knowledge bases. First of all, we recognize that these are not and should not be considered projects. That's the most important thing, that these are not R01 grants that you have to think about in the same three hypotheses, and one of them is innovative. No, these are research resources. They need to be funded like that. So these two funding announcements have been long going, and they're continually evolving. They have their own study sections that are reviewed by people in this community who review resources to think about, is this something that the community of these investigators value? Is there a value to the community? Are they developing good research data management practices? Are they, do they have an external advisory board? Things like that. We really want to see the development and the support of software as infrastructure. So this is a hard thing. Amazingly, most of the ICs support this, but in various different flavors. So sometimes we'll have an early stage repository, FOA, and not every IC will support it. That's their decision, but we have these mechanisms out there for the research community. This is an example of some of the things that we funded. Again, your repository needs to fill a scientific gap, have very good data management practices, and thank goodness there's folks like RDM Kit that have those out there for our researchers. You need to engage your community, and you need to govern your data management and your data by a life cycle preservation approach. This is really important. We do resonate with your thinking about life cycle preservation of data and data infrastructure. You'll notice that there's a red box around some of these, and Guy probably has figured it out already. Those are Global Biodata Coalition biomedical data resources that have gone through the process and been vetted and are now sort of designated as such. And that's really important for us because it's like Core Trust Seal. It tells us that not only are we valuing these, but the international community are valuing these. And I'll get to why this is important in a minute, but I just want to point out that we actually do resonate with a lot of the things that you're thinking about here internationally. So I don't have to explain it to you. You've already seen it. We do resonate with it. Oh, that's also from Guy. Okay, so here is a snapshot of how the funding has looked over the last few years. And this is, the analysis was done in February, so it might be slightly outdated. We've had some challenges with getting things reviewed and getting them out the door recently. So we did the analysis in February. And what you can see is that many institutes co-fund different data repositories. At least 17 or more ICs are funding at least one, but oftentimes more than one repository. So we work across NIH to co-fund your applications. My office has a set-aside pool of money that we also fund data resources. We fund those resources that are broad and span many institutes and many missions. We fund a large number of knowledge bases and a little bit smaller number of repositories because there just are more knowledge-based applications, I believe. And over the past several years, we funded about 40 of these resources. So I'd like to say that this program is going strong, and we're going to continue it in the foreseeable future. And most of those funding repositories are domain-specific, UniPro, for example, or Redfin. We also have another program that brings together the general suppositories. And so the question we asked at a workshop was, suppose we wanted to bring competitors together to work together to make data sharing a little bit easier and a little bit more informative for researchers. What would that look like to you? And so this is what came out. It's co-opetition, where the generalist repositories work together on things that they all are doing and that they would benefit from a mutual sharing of information, or actually sharing of development of code. And so things like community outreach, or consistent ways to identify data with persistent identifiers, or consistent metadata. So they work together on things that make sense to them. And where they don't work together is in where they compete, like visualization, for example, or if they have some analytics that they want to add, or some additional metadata, or some additional integrations, all supporting the FAIR principles, but also supporting the idea that they'll work together where it makes sense. And I'd like to propose that that might be a good way of thinking about our domain-specific repositories as well. Even though you don't share often the same types of data, there are things that you are sharing that you would benefit from working together on. So this is sort of the common co-opetition model, best practices for data repositories, something that we want to get together. Consistent metadata, it doesn't have to all be the same. And boy, if you want to think about something that's hard, developing metadata for generalist repositories, not easy. There's a very small slice of that pie. And so some of the questions we have is, what does it mean to make richer metadata for a generalist repository so that they don't become a domain-specific repository, but yet we can build better graphs and better ways to discover data within a generalist repository. Other things that we want to think about is quality control and quality assurance, connecting digital objects like persistent identifiers, cataloging use cases that help us in our training efforts, and in fact, preparing materials for training and conducting outreach. This might be a little hard to read, but it's a sort of where we are right now snapshot in terms of implementing metadata fields from DataCite, implementing search based on particular use cases, and implementing common metrics. So these are three things that they said, yes, we will spend time working together. And by the way, the funding for the GRAY initiative is really small. For the entire program, it's probably less than $3 million, or maybe just about. It's a really small investment from NIH, but the payoff for us is really huge because they're helping us develop ways of thinking about co-opetition amongst data resources. And so it's worth thinking about it, and maybe even talking to some of them. And I think Mark Hanel was here yesterday and may still be here. And I'm borrowing one of his slides in a minute. I think this might actually be his slide. It is indeed. So here's something that's really valuable for us as a funder, which is, hey, in publications, how many papers are linked to data sets in a generalist repository? And this is coming from Figshare, I believe. And we can look at this across our generalist repositories. And I'd love to make similar figures for your repositories as well. And you can see it spread across each institution. What do we do with this data? In my office, we give it to the institute directors. And we say, look, your data, your research is being propagated in this way. And it's really valuable for people to see a return on the investment. And also, it helps build a little co-opetition in the ICs because the ICs all want to have the larger bars. So another way to think about this. And so it's really important to link identifiers with data and then link them to your papers, but also equally important, link them to your ORCID IDs so that we have a way and you have a way of showing data being used in the community. And so to do that and make it just a little easier for you, we established a program with DataCite. So NIH pays DataCite to be an umbrella member, and then any of our funded repositories can use DataCite to actually mint DOIs for the data. So that's something that you get free. It's not a lot of money for us, but the value and the return on investment is really huge so that we can actually start to show how is data being used in the community and how are researchers using and citing data. And to that end, I just want to say that it's been a pleasure working with Mike Chang, the director of the I Institute. And this is really, he's really pushing this, and it's the S Index. So it's really nice that we have this data management and sharing policy, but it's sort of like a little bit of a stick. What we would rather see is more of a carrot, which is can we incentivize and quantitatively enable data sharing through an S index so that people can see how their data is being used, how it's being shared, incentivize collaboration in data depositors and data users and publishers. And can we really create good data sharing metrics? So that's the idea of the S index. There's some thinking around this, altmetrics, DataWorks, the thing I just told you about. Litcoin is something that we're doing at NIH to spur innovation in ways of creating publication-free text, the open global citation corpus, and Zenodo. So these are all things that are happening right now in this space. And the S index challenge was released in 2024 in September. It's already passed phase 1. So now the applicants that have been chosen to go on to phase 2 are now competing, and we hope to get those winners in February of 2026. So stay tuned. I think that we'll have some really exciting results from the challenge of the S index, and we're really super pleased to support it along with a lot of institute centers and offices within NIH. So it is something that we're really excited about. So we know that biomedical data resources are vital, but they're also really valuable. We're generating more and more data. The amount of data in strides is like 250 plus petabytes, about 100 petabytes. So it's almost half a zettabyte, I think, at this point. It's really huge. No doubt it will continue to grow. The requirements for managing and sharing those data are huge. The policy will increase the demand of data. The cost ever increases. The money ever decreases. As you've just seen, we have a really interesting optimization problem. We want to sustain biomedical data resources and the ecosystem. It's not always easy to know how to do that. We know that funding is challenging. We don't want to see this in the way that researchers get funding and then it ends and then there's a gap and then researchers need to get more funding. And we want to think about this in a holistic manner. It's very hard. So we have a working group thinking about what would be a significant biomedical data asset. How can we actually create and maintain stewardship of data resources? How do we describe a significant biomedical data asset? How do we operationalize best practices? How do we standardize what makes sense in the co-opetition model, like metrics or metadata? How do we adopt infrastructure that will reduce our costs, like leveraging strides, for example? And how can we responsibly provide oversight as a funding agent? So we're working on this. The report is going to be done fairly soon. I think it'll be very exciting. I think it aligns very well with the Global Biodata Coalition and the thinking that you're doing there, as well as in Elixir and other spaces. So it's an exciting idea. It's not the only group to do it. There's the Elixir Core Data Resources, and there's the DOE Pure Public Resources. So other agencies and other entities have been thinking about how do we sustain our important strategic core assets, and how do we do it in a way that is good for the community and also fits within our own funding models. I don't think I have enough time to tell you about everything. So we have a data management center of excellence. It does produce some learning opportunities. It also does a lot of workbooks, including in partnership with Elixir and at BioIT, the workbook of fair data verification. And we have different types of trainings, and we also work with the Data Curation Network on different series of events. It's a lot of activities. I've only described the first pillar. I could tell you some other time about the other 4. It's a rich initiative at NIH in data science, and I'm really glad that we could talk a little bit about it. And thank you so much, Miha, and thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.